Welcome to Gallant Conversations. Gallant is a business-to-business consultancy specializing in industrial innovation.
We drive growth for our clients through strategies and insights in brand management and strategic communications.
If you're in an industry focused on progress at the macro level, we're here to facilitate a conversation, starting now. Hi, everyone. I'm here with Junaid Ali, who is the CEO of Prismecs. And Prismecs is a fully integrated EPC company that also does turnkey operations. In addition, they have a company called eIndustrify. And eIndustrify is designed to provide local content and products and services to the global industrial market, really creating a competitive advantage for folks in those arenas. And I hear you've got some exciting news about eIndustrify that just kind of came.
Yeah, Brandy, thank you for having me. We have been really growing on that maintenance, repair, and operations front, where we are actually opening stores for companies who are traditionally in the industrial business supply chain, but they don't have an e-commerce footprint. So as of my last check, we have about 10,000 products listed on that store. So we started off with zero, and now we have about 10,000 different products. And to be honest, a lot of the industry folks are really loving the idea where we can consolidate this whole marketplace and provide services to these parts where they're being needed, especially now.
And so that's one of the key components of eIndustrify, right? If you provide the product, you can also do the install, the maintenance, the whole 9 yards in many instances, right?
Yeah, essentially that's right. So I lightly use the whole thought process of do business, which might just make very true sense to you, like Uber Eats business,
yes,
right? I mean,
yes.
you have multiple restaurants and you have different menus, and then you have drivers who are delivering the food to your doorstep. Or think of like an IKEA model. Like, I mean, if you've ordered something, you not only get your furniture, but you get a guy who's going to assemble the furniture for you. So essentially the same thing. When you look at the industrial manufacturing world, what they lack many times is the response time to the product. And then just managing who your client is, where the product is gone. It all comes in handy if we can just have those service people around your product anywhere in the globe. So virtually we've been able to do that successfully.
That's incredible. Congratulations. Now, so this I think kind of segues into another question that I had for you. I've heard you say this a couple of times, and I would love for you to explain it, because you're talking about sort of, when you said Uber Eats and things like that, you are talking about kind of that gig economy model. And what I've heard you say is something along the lines of the gig economy is the gigawatt economy. What does that mean?
Yeah, so think about it, right? Just like transformation of the sort of like B2C has happened over the last 2 years, whether it's Amazon Business Services or Uber or various platforms like that. Essentially what has that enabled is freelancers to kind of provide their services outside of their 9 to 5, right? But when I looked at that business from an industrial or power or energy, let's just call it energy segment from our daily lives, it was still very connected on some sort of level where people did not have a lot of autonomy, right? So what we have done, especially during the COVID, is we have enabled those subject matter experts to think outside of the box and give them a platform through eIndustrify to provide their services when we are bringing those products on board.
And so just kind of taking a step back, when you're talking about people in the field doing all of these things, is essentially the availability of software and support and data transmission, all of that. I mean, that's a make or break, right?
It is truly, because now people are working from home, right? There is a hybrid work culture where people used to go work in co-locations. Now everybody's working from home. The grid is stressed out. So essentially, and while the grid is stressed out, and there's various reasons for why it is, one of the things is that while people are connected digitally, they're using all types of data. You're connected more to your emails. You're checking your social media network. People kind of think about this data centers are only for the social media, which is absolutely not the case. I mean, the data is now becoming more and more, the data sets are becoming more and more useful in our daily manufacturing life. They are becoming more useful in telemedicine, for instance. So as we are growing this gig economy model in various aspects of life, there is going to be a strain on the energy usage. So we are at the forefront of it. We are basically allowing the people to work under our wrapper to give the air services, being subject matter experts, and then just managing and growing the asset as the energy demand grows.
And so kind of bearing that in mind, when you're looking at sort of these new functions, these new jobs, these entire careers that maybe we would not have even fathomed just because of the kind of the dawn of AI. How does this idea of like bolstering and protecting and fortifying your data centers, fortifying your power supply, protecting all of that, how does that roll into it when you've got like a lot of unknown variables with maybe a field team that you may have never ever been in the same room with, and then you've got kind of your typical power supply strains multiplied however many fold because of, I mean, it just seems like I can't even believe we can turn the lights on.
No, but you're right. But you got to think about it this, right? I mean, you cannot just be a pilot and then just come and start piloting the airplane, right? I mean, you have to have certain credentials,
right?
And we as a business are not just out there and winging this whole thing. We have a format to make sure that the people who we are discussing and talking and just putting in front of our multi-million-dollar worth of power plants are enablers, and they can do the job. But again, coming back to this whole piloting a plane, I mean, yes, you have to meet the credentials, and then you have to follow certain safety standards, regulations. So it's not like that, I mean, even if you're driving a taxi with an Uber, you gotta follow the rules, right?
Right.
You cannot go beyond the speed limits. But it's again enabling the people to do and work as they desire.
And then if I was, running an industrial company, though, how would I make sure that I was protecting that constant flow of power to people in a kind of workforce that is not necessarily plugged into a particular location? How do you manage those things? How do you put the rules in place? What do you think somebody should know in that?
Well, other than the qualification standpoint, I mean, you just got to have a very technology focus on that, right? I mean, you just got to understand that in particular geography, what works and what doesn't work. Temperature and localized data is quite important. But before even I answer that question, I think one of the things what you must understand, Brandy, is that as you grow the industrial e-commerce, you cannot be a one company managing various aspects of it. And this is why I keep on saying the cross-training of technology is important. I mean, I cannot sell a product out of Europe into Middle East or out of Middle East into the US without having a cross-trained workforce. So I think it's time where companies really step up and start cross-training people between various technologies. Because if you think about big corporate structures, if you're a subject matter expert, that's where you spend your life, right? And that's the only one thing What we are trying to do is we're giving reasonable maneuvering to individuals who show that interest.
So if I was running a power plant, okay, what would I need to bear in mind in terms of the genesis of AI? What would I need to add to my skill set? What would I need to think about in the middle of the night?
Well, there is stringent requirement for data centers to run as far as the backup and resiliency goes, and that's where you probably have heard about these 5 nines, right? You know, you need 99.999% availability guarantee because you have to have a backup to a backup. So you first of all, you need the right technology. Second, you need the right fuel supply, right? Then you got to understand that the technology you have chosen is able to run for X amount of years before grid power shows up, because essentially what we're trying to do is something in lines of concept of microgrid or micro-utilities. A microgrid, everybody keeps on hearing about that term, but micro-utility is like, you know, literally setting up small independent power plants and then just running it. Now, in the utilities world, that was done. It's nothing new. It's been done for the last 30 years. But when we talk about the C&I world, and when we talk about the data centers world, it's something fairly new. And so one of those due diligences that we got to not only find the right technology partner, we also enable our workforce who is really geared to work 24/7. And that's where, to be honest, that's where the good part is, that we are trying to work with our customers and strengthening that. Like, okay, you know, if data center has 1 or 2, 3 different roles, and those guys are supposed to be at the data centers in some sort of a rotation program, how can we train power people to understand some of the data center work? So how can we leverage the cost and share the benefits?
That makes perfect sense. And then the other thing that I'm hearing about is this idea, when we're talking about power source, if we could roll back to that a little bit, you know, for the first time in a little while, it seems like, companies, natural gas companies, are thinking about becoming power companies. Where is the line drawn? All of this sort of thing. What is that all about?
Well, if you really think about it, right? I mean, just the way, and without naming any customers, just the way the grid is constrained in Texas. Let's not talk about anywhere else in the world, but just in Texas, you know, right now the gas prices are negative. And even when the gas prices are negative, these gas companies who've got to run their processors, their pumps, and whatever, their infrastructure, they are essentially gas marketing company, and they're paying negative. There's a negative gas price, but then when they look at the grid is one, not resilient, and then they still have to have some sort of a backup, and then they're paying extra charges for their demand response or their peak charges, which is essentially they get hit quite bad. So their thought is that, okay, you know what, essentially we're not a power company. So how do we hire a company like Prismecs who can just come in and run a power plant for them, and they can use that gas and build their own power and at least balance, you know, or kind of, you know, peak shave their dependency on the grid. It gives them two things. It reduces their bills, and then it gives them a resilient backup. You saw what happened in Houston, right?
Yes,
so 2.6 million people without power. So it's not something, I mean, think about it, you know, you're the energy capital of the world, and you're in everybody's media and global media, and then you get to show that 2.6 million people are without power. And there are some areas where people are still out of power.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so frightening.
Yeah.
And are we just, I mean, not from an ecological perspective, but from a grid resilience perspective, will we see more of these issues before?
The temperatures are rising.
Yeah.
These events are happening. I was actually on a Teams call with my team, and they said that there was a tornado or hurricane somewhere in North Carolina, right? So it's going to happen. I mean, you know, the supply lines are pretty stressed out right now.
How much power would a company need to? How much power would a company need to use to be able to justify their own small plant?
Well, I mean, I'm glad that you're asking that question, but let me just tell you a big statistics which I read recently. So what I read was that when you are Googling something, so you got to understand, and there's this hyperscale data centers, and then there's these edge data centers, and then there's colo data centers where you are actually putting a data center, and then different companies are putting their asset, and you are supposed to give them. It's sort of like, how would I tell you? Like, what was that co-working space model?
Like a co-op, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
there was a company which was
WeWork.
WeWork, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but the data centers are sort of like WeWork as well, right? I mean, you give them an environment, and then your customers will bring their equipment, and then you give them that power, the cooling, and all that. So I was just reading these different statistics, and one of the one was quite important. So when you search something on Google, you use about 0.03 watt hour. Without getting into the details, I mean, that's the amount of power you need. But when you use ChatGPT to ask for a similar string, it uses 0.30 watt hour. So it basically uses 10 times more power, but it essentially gives you 100 times better results. Because it's just,
Right.
So that's the idea, right? So the power demand is surging. The data centers are becoming more thinner and leaner, and they're becoming more distributed. So yes, there's going to be major hyperscalers. That's the way it is, like the Microsofts of the world and the AWS and the Googles of the world. But then you will start seeing, to your point, the power demand surging for not only for the data centers, but because think about it, the more data is needed, the more power is needed, and the more power is needed, more gas is needed. So it's like a circular thing.
Right.
It's just, if you're drilling more gas, you're drilling it to sell it to some sort of a function. Whether it's, and you will mark my words, I mean, the way the whole trend is going where cars are becoming more e-cars. I mean, China is very aggressive. In 2030, they want to have that. Most of their grid is now on wind. That sort of resiliency and backup needs to come into the U.S. market as well.
So when I'm thinking about just sort of jumps in the use of AI from an industrial perspective, I see it as just this kind of almost like a chicken and egg sort of thing, right? So you've got these opportunities to increase efficiency through predictive modeling, through, just any sorts of, operational efficiencies and things of that nature. And then you've got the strain to power said models. So when is it going to kind of level out? You said it's a tenfold better result. Is it delivering tenfold now? Or is it sort of like this comes out of your back pocket, this comes out of your front pocket, and people don't quite know how to figure it out quite yet?
I think that question, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be able to give you a better answer. But look, I mean, just the way we work with GE is one of our biggest customer, and their whole line of turbines has really been booked for the next 3 years. Now, in the next 3 years, are we playing a catch-up game, or are we going to be ahead of the curve? There's different philosophies out there, but just talking to my peers and my friends, again, I don't think it's a problem which is just that quickly resolvable. Because the amount of money flowing into the 5 companies like Microsoft, NVIDIA, and some of these is in parallel to the rest of the economy of the world. So I'm not even comparing utilities to that kind of market. These 5 majors are controlling the amount of money what the rest of the global stock market is. So the innovation, the speed to deliver is quite ahead. And if we don't resolve this I mean, we cannot build the grid overnight, Brandy. It's not. I mean, we cannot run cables fast enough. So, this is why the whole idea of distributed manpower, distributed O&M, distributed power, and taking and giving power to where it's needed is more practical than just building these miles and miles of transmission and distribution.
And then how does Prismecs get in the middle of that mix?
Well, we are enablers, right? We are enabling on one end, we are enabling the clients who are not traditionally a power company. So we are providing them, okay, bring your own power kind of a concept. Or we are just enabling them, hey, you are a utility and we have an asset and we can just help you with it. So, or we are working in some cases with becoming very select OEMs. We are trying to be very strategically aligned with them to give them that facility to become an operation and maintenance business.
That's interesting. And what do you think is the lowest hanging fruit in terms of, number one, distributed power? Like, what is going to be the easiest problem to solve? And what is the one that you're just, you think you guys are the only one to solve it?
Well, I think the easy problem is just we putting our efforts in enabling the distributed power market, enabling and converting, which is a big thing, converting the CapEx for even large institutions to more of an OpEx, right? So they get to work with us instead of putting a lot of cash out there. We get to spend and strengthen their capitals, and we bring our capital strength and just convert that CapEx to OpEx, basically, right? And I think those are some low-hanging fruits. But I think as the economy is emerging, I think there is going to be a lot of room for us to play. Just as I said, we kind of launched this eIndustrify. I mean, we have some really, really good ideas to launch a couple of other businesses, which will strengthen us. And one of them is, again, as I said, is cross-training our service abilities.
Right. Excellent. Now, you just went on quite a rock star trip all over the Middle East in the middle of summer to avoid this hurricane season in Houston, which I think is very telling. What did you learn? What were the things? What were the most impressive takeaways?
I think one of the biggest thing I'm learning is that from an economical standpoint, and this is sometimes really, really impressed me, like how Asia is ahead of when it comes to digitization and reliance on the service, the whole service economy. I mean, everything is on your doorstep through literally WhatsApp. And so I think, but when you talk to them and when you express the fact that, this is what's happening, they acknowledge it, but they don't seem to have I mean, of course, I'm just talking, I hang out with different cross-industrial people, but they acknowledge that the problem is there, but they're trying to look for answers. So me spending time in Europe and Middle East was especially geared toward that how can we make our presence be known over there. Yeah.
And help them.
And help them, of course.
They need some help.
They do. They do. Yeah, they do.
Interesting.
I mean, for example, Kuwait, we have a project in Oman, which actually, is very crucial to this part of Oman where they're running a large refinery. But Oman has a trade agreement where they can sell electricity into Kuwait. So Kuwait right now is in exceptionally bad requirement. I mean, they're in dire shape. So the discussion was, how can we produce power in Oman and not only help Oman, but also help Kuwait? We should be signing something with a renewable solar company who has gotten a project in Oman, and we should be taking over that project from them and sort of running it as a daily thing, as an O&M. So again, fantastic opportunities in that region.
Excellent. Well, listen, thank you so much for sharing some time with us today. We've got we've got an article that you can read pretty shortly. Junaid's talking a little bit more. It's sort of a call to action for power companies to really dig in and look at some true innovation in terms of distributed power. And if you would like to learn more about Prismecs, you can take a look at prismecs.com or also connect on LinkedIn or anything like that.
Yes, absolutely. I'm available on LinkedIn. Eager to help.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Brandy.
Thanks for joining this conversation with Gallant.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and gained meaningful insight.
If you find this entertaining or helpful, subscribe and leave us a review.
And don't forget to share this conversation with your network.
For more resources and to stay updated with Gallant Insights and our amazing client portfolio companies, visit gallantculture.com.
Join us next time as we continue to explore perspectives within the industrial innovation space propelling us forward.
Until then, we ask you to stay thoughtful and curious.